Hostile nation states target government contractors around the clock, and with the threat landscape getting more dangerous by the day, the DoD is prioritizing the implementation of CMMC. Kelly Mullins, Vice President of Global Operations at EdgeCase Research, joins us for an essential session to help better understand the critical role of cybersecurity when working with the DoD. Kelly brings over 25 years of executive leadership experience, specializing in the growth and adaptation of organizations to meet the challenges of AI and technology. Her background includes significant roles at Carnegie Mellon University's School of Computer Science and the National Robotics Engineering Center, where she ensured compliance with U.S. government regulations under the DoD. In today's session, she will share valuable insights into why security should be a board-level discussion, how security and IT should work together, and what effect cybersecurity has on managing suppliers. Kelly, thank you for being here with us today.
Kelly, thanks so much for taking the time to share your experience and perspective with our audience today. Obviously, everyone here today is very focused on CMMC and compliance, but as you know, the devil is truly in the details. So with that, I'd love to actually start by just hearing from you how you describe your role, because I think what's really common amongst our audience today and with CMMC generally is that it's typically one of many things that an executive has on their plate. And I think in your case, you actually have a much broader set of responsibilities beyond just getting the business compliant with CMMC or really even just dealing with DoD, Department of Defense contracts. And I think that resonates with our audience who, in my experience, many executives have full plates, day jobs that they're already trying to get through. And CMMC was like an add-on to an existing, probably already full plate. And so I'd love to understand, is that true in your case? And what does your day job look like? And how do you balance that and fit in CMMC?
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Eric. I'm super excited to be part of this. You're right. I did have a day job prior to compliance. It was filled my entire day and then some, and then compliance came along. So you're absolutely correct. For me, I am responsible for information technology and cybersecurity at EdgeCase Research. I also have business operations, facilities, physical security, customer success, and then also compliance now. So, the thing for me is that CMMC is not our only compliance requirement. So it's not just CMMC, which is super important to our business, but it's also, ISO compliance. Another compliance requirement we have is TSAX, which is a German automotive requirement that we are required to meet. But the good thing is, for me, my day job kind of folds into all of the compliance requirements. So I do have the physical security, I do have IT, I do have cybersecurity. So I've been able to balance that because of the role that I actually have now really meets a lot of the requirements and puts more emphasis on those day job responsibilities.
That's really interesting. The international component, that's kind of almost a unique set of requirements within a set of requirements. And
Yes.
To hear that you've also had the international regulatory requirements as well, that can get pretty complex. And I know we hear from security and compliance professionals all the time, and you referenced it about how important CMMC is. And, I think security and compliance professionals will always tell you how critical, of course, it is to fund security and compliance initiatives. But as an executive who has to balance everything that you just mentioned, and sometimes CMMC in many businesses is an unfunded requirement because it wasn't necessarily baked into the business cycle and the budgetary cycle. So with someone who has overall responsibility for IT, security, and compliance, how do you think about the funding for cybersecurity and balancing that against the needs of the business? How did you approach that?
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that I've been fortunate with in my career is that I've had leadership teams supporting me fully for the and understanding the importance of whether it be NIST 800 171, CMMC now. Um, they understand the requirements. With NIST 800 171, that was a little squishy and it made it difficult because it was like, well, are they really going to assess us? Does it really make sense for us to spend money on it? Eh. For CMMC, it appears differently, especially depending on how you present it to your leadership team. So for me, I was fortunate. I came into Edge Case Research just as the budgets were being prepared. So I knew what their business was. I knew what they needed. So we could start that first round of budgetary requirements from the beginning of my tenure here, which really helped me because I didn't have to wait a cycle for budgeting. I didn't have to really rob Peter to pay Paul with something else. But it really is important to get into that cycle and to help your leadership understand the importance of the requirements. And that with CMMC, in my opinion, there seems to be more teeth with it. You know, our contractors are asking us to prove that we have the requirements met. They're asking us to provide documentation that shows that we've met the requirements. And to me, that gives me teeth going to my leadership team saying, look, here are the requests we're getting. This is what we need to meet. And to do that, here's the budget that I need to be able to do that. Not always, sometimes you have to be creative. You don't always get the full budget that you've asked for, of course. So then you start thinking creatively and you think, okay, so if we break this down into pieces, what can I achieve with the budget I have? How do I manage that and make it like the biggest bang for my buck in the compliance and in securing our infrastructure? So like we're always having to play that sort of double-edged sword, is like the requirements for the CMMC regulations versus what do I need to enable my team at EdgeCase to be able to do their jobs, to do it securely. And how are we managing that whole picture, not just the compliance component of it?
Well, what a thoughtful answer there. I mean, I think that's going to be very powerful for folks listening today, because I mean, you hit on, I think, the essence of what I think a lot of companies and executives are struggling with is how do I make the business case? And you gave several examples within your answer. I just want to kind of explore a little bit more. First, very smart, great timing. Get your job at the beginning of the budget cycle, so that was well played. But beyond that, the idea that it sounds like one of the things you did is take to the business the story, which is true, that CMMC has more teeth now. It actually looks like it's going to be enforced. Here's what we're hearing from the contractors that we serve around kind of asking for our evidence of compliance. And it sounds like you used those different kind of threads to put together a business case ultimately. But what I loved about what you said too is no matter, I'll say it a little differently than you said it, but trying to summarize, no matter how good the business case, you're not going to get everything at once. So you also had to prioritize based on the business case you made. I mean, am I kind of interpreting that right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it was not even just prioritization, it was creativity. Like, how can we get this requirement met? Maybe not with the most efficient or most desired, whether it be software, infrastructure, whatever it might have been that we were asking for. Can we step back and say, how do we do this differently and still meet that requirement? Because there's times where, one of the things about CMMC is we do have a little bit of interpretation. So instead of using software or infrastructure, maybe we can use policy. Policy is a great way to also achieve some of the requirements within the CMMC complex set of requirements that they have. So it's really about thinking sometimes outside of the box. And one of the things that I've liked so much is working, and this is sort of a plug for CyberSheath, but working with your team has really helped us to be able to look at that differently, because you do have the compliance aspect of your organization where they can help you think, okay, can you do something to meet this requirement without software or infrastructure? Maybe it's changing the process within your organization. Maybe it's changing the policy within your organization. So maybe sometimes you can just start by changing settings within your infrastructure that you already have existing. And that helps to harden your infrastructure. It helps to limit the cost and the spend that you're having to ask for from your leadership team.
Yeah, you made an amazing point there, I think, Kelly, around the idea that not all of CMMC has to be solved with technical controls, be it software, be it infrastructure, because I think one of the misconceptions is that, well, I'm going to buy a tremendous amount of technology that's going to be very expensive. Then I got to deploy all that technology. I got to integrate all that technology. I have to manage all that technology, and that becomes cost prohibitive for most companies. But as you rightly said, there's policy decisions and changes to the way your business handles CUI and your workflows that you can make that are far lower cost options that still, to your point, align with how the requirements of CMMC, and there is some ability to interpret the requirements. And I think that's a very smart choice that a lot of organizations maybe haven't explored or maybe aren't aware is true, because you can't solve this with all technology. You actually can't, and you certainly can't affordably. So I think that's a great point for just people practically trying to get compliant and trying to do it within a budget. So I think very good advice for the audience. One of the other things, just, you mentioned international earlier, and that made me think about supply chains. We've all become much more aware of our supply chains, obviously, post-COVID, how reliant we are upon those supply chains, the vulnerabilities they create. You mentioned your primes and your contractors asking for evidence of compliance to kind of see what their vulnerabilities may be. Given that reality, do you have any advice for vetting your supply chain, your IT supply chain, to manage your business risk? And are there any one or two key things that you think about and you look for when managing your suppliers?
Yeah, that's a great point. We're really very particular about who we partner with. And when we say partner, we truly mean partner. We want to build a relationship with our suppliers so that they understand what our business is, what we're trying to achieve, and the urgency of a request when it comes in from us. I hate crying wolf on a regular basis, but sometimes you have to. And sometimes, if you have that relationship established, it really goes a long way. We are very particular, and we have a pretty intense vetting process for our suppliers. So, it's really about having an RFP that's complete and understood, and then taking the time to actually review that with each of the potential suppliers for that service, or the hardware, whatever it might be, so that they understand what they're up against, not in a negative way, but really what the demand is going to be coming from us, how we expect to interact with them, what our expectations are, and then really vetting through due diligence, like what they can and can't do. The supply chain has been a little broken for 4 years now. And that makes it difficult. For me, I look at this in two lenses. Either is this an upgrade to a service that we currently have, or is this a new service that we're installing into our infrastructure, into our processes, whatever it might be. And then, I kind of treat them differently. With the upgrades, we've already established a relationship. We have ongoing conversations with the provider. They understand what we're trying to do. We understand what they're capable of. And then with a new service, it's really about that RFP process. And I know that everybody's like, I have 8,000 things I'm doing every single day. I don't have time to meet with these people. They have an RFP, let them put their bid together. But I found in my career overall, I've been putting RFPs out for 2 decades, that really taking that time and investing, you end up with the best solution in the end. Not only do you have a solution that works from a technical perspective, but you've also established that relationship so that you can call on them and say, hey, look, this is what I'm up against. How can you help me? Is there something you can do to expedite? What does that look like? And they have much more invested in you because you've invested in them. And so that's what I found has worked really well. Even during the COVID lockdown times, we were in the middle of putting together an office, which sounds kind of funny since everybody was remote, but we were doing that and it was really difficult to get hardware. But we had an established relationship with our provider. We had an established relationship with a third-party provider that they sold through. And they really worked hard for us to get us the things that we needed in the time frame we needed so we could meet our requirements for entering the office space when the lockdown was lifted.
I think the idea of putting it in the RFP, could pay a lot of dividends because one, it sets expectations. Again, not in a negative way, as you said, but it sets expectations up front. Like, hey, if we're going to partner, here's where you need to be, and if you're not there, let's talk about how we get you there. So there's no kind of surprises relative to cost down the road. It's an excellent way, maybe the only way ultimately to truly align with the requirement where if you think about supply chain risk, especially relative to CMMC, primes must flow the requirements down contractually to their subcontractors. And if you capture that in the RFP process, you're doing that before the relationship really has even started. And so I think that really is a great best practice for managing subcontractor risk relative to CMMC or any number of compliance requirements, I imagine. I think that's a great way to do it. You've got a big job and international components, regulatory requirements well beyond CMMC, IT, security, compliance, facilities, physical security. So there's an endless number of things, I imagine, that you could convey to your board. And so I'm curious, how do you at all choose topics that you select for discussion to your board? And is security always on the agenda, or how do you approach that?
So we are a startup. So security is not always on the agenda. With any company that's in a high growth industry, we don't always have time to have their input for them to have full understanding. But my approach has always been to educate. We need to educate the board. They need to understand what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to accomplish it. They need to understand the importance of it for our recurring revenue and continuing revenue. So that to me has been the key to this, is educating them, helping them understand what we're trying to achieve, and then having them trust me to be able to say, this is really what we need. Like, we're not asking for this because it's the next shiny thing. We're not asking for this because, someone down the street has that and we want to have it too. This is really about compliance, meeting the requirements, and really having a strong interaction and trust between the two, myself and the board, my team and the board, my team and the leadership team. One of the things that we see regularly is really about being involved from the beginning of decisions within the company and helping people to understand the importance of compliance. And that's whether you're talking to the board, whether you're talking to leadership, whether you're talking to users, whether you're talking to suppliers. Like, they need to understand the importance to us of that compliance component. And I think that once they realize that we're not doing this because we want to be difficult, we're not doing this because we want to spend money, we're doing this because we have to, and we need to do what we are contractually obligated to do to continue to serve the U.S. government.
I think when you talk about revenue and, just one of the things that sticks out in so many of your answers is just kind of your coming at the problem of CMMC or compliance generally from a business perspective and tying it back to business objectives like revenue retention and winning contracts and being compliant to enable the business. And it just really comes through in your answers that there's actually a business reason for this. And it sounds like one of the keys to your success that I think broadly could be shared with the audience in a way that they could use it for their success is to put these requirements in terms that matter to the business. I mean, am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. That has been, this is not my first job where I've had to do compliance. So in my past life, I've had compliance requirements as well. And what I've found is to make that business case, That's where you gain leverage. That's where you help people understand. But I do believe that it all stems back to education. If they don't understand why you're trying to do this, if they don't understand the impact of the business, if they don't understand that this isn't just, one of those things that somebody goes, oh yeah, you have to do this. No, this is a requirement of our contracts. This is how we continue to do business. Education is still by far, I found, the best approach to helping the leadership understand, helping to get yes as the answer to your ask, and then helping the organization as a whole to accept the constraints that some compliance requirements can put on them.
Yeah, I think the education point is key, and you may not even realize how it's coming through in your answers, because like sometimes when I hear people talk about CMMC education, it's like, here are the levels of CMMC, here's what's required here. But in your kind of what I'm hearing about you from education is education to why it matters to the business, why we have to meet this to be able to bid on the contract, how we can do it affordably, how we can prioritize, within this budget cycle. I think one of the things that I think is super useful is to the education point, but doing it in the manner that resonates with your audience. And so, tying it back to the proposal requirements, tying it back to RFP requirements. The business understands those things. They don't probably understand, different technologies for multi-factor authentication, or why you need monitoring, or and they probably don't need to. They need an executive like you, I think, to be a little bit of the bridge between, here's the business reason, I'll take care of the actual IT security and compliance piece and put that together, but here's the why. And it sounds like that's been key to your approach.
Absolutely. It has been key for every position that I have held where compliance was a component of it.
Yeah, I think that's such a different, and I think the industry has certainly moved on from kind of security as the bad cop, and there's CMMC is a new requirement, so relatively, I mean, it's been around in different forms for a long time, but so there's a lot of FUD out there, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and I just don't think that ever works. It sounds like that's certainly not your approach and in your experience, but you mentioned being a startup, although you're a big startup, very fast growing. And so how do you avoid, always playing catch up with the business, or is it even avoidable? And then security tends to become, or compliance tends to become a roadblock to the business because you kind of weren't there at the origin of whatever initiative the business is pursuing. How do you avoid that, or do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. From my perspective, what I've done is, in all of the roles that I've played, I've tried to really be part of the conversation from the start. So whether it's the development team, whether it's marketing, whether it's finance, like, make us IT, security a part of the conversation. We're not here to tell you no to everything, because I think that's the misconception people have. Oh, if I include them, they're going to tell me I can't do what I need to do. And that's not our case. Like, for our organization, my goal is to help you achieve what you need to achieve securely and safely for the organization overall. And from my perspective, being involved in the conversation and helping them understand that, like, this isn't about making their lives difficult. This isn't about telling them no to every request they have. It's about partnering and saying, how can we help you achieve what you need to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? And having real requirements, because a lot of times they'll go into these conversations and they don't have a requirement. They just know what they want to do. But why do you want to do this? How do you want to do this? What is it going to help you achieve for your part of the organization? And then how can we help you do that in a safe and secure computing manner? And I think that has been, when they realize that we're not there to punish them and to make their lives difficult, it's like that aha moment. And that's always the fun part to see, because they're like, oh, wait, so I can come to you and ask you questions, and you're going to, like, be nice about it. You're not going to tell me no, go away. You're not going to be like, absolutely not, you can't do this, that's insane. But you're going to help me figure out a way to do this so I can do my job. And, like, yes, that's what we're going to do. And that aha moment for them is remarkable. And now what we're seeing is that people come to us now. We don't have to, like, be always in that meeting, but people will come to us and be like, Kelly, I want to do this. What would the approach be that you would take? Or one of my team members, hey, I want to do this. What would be the approach that you would take? How can we achieve this and still play within the realm that we need to play in? And so it's really become an open dialogue as opposed to you must include us. Now it's like, oh, wait, okay, they can help us. Like they actually take the workload off of me for having to do all the research, for having to figure out what the options are, for figuring out how to secure whatever it is we may be doing. Like they're going to do that for us. They're going to help us do that. And then we're going to achieve what we need to achieve in a much faster and a more secure manner. So it's worked out really well to be part of the conversation. And sometimes you don't always get that opportunity to come into an organization and do that, but you have to start building that trust. You have to start helping them see that you're building a culture of trust in the organization so that they understand, like you have to do what you say you're going to do. You can't be the bad cop all the time. There's times where you have to be, and it's just like no is the answer. But you don't always have to be the bad cop. You can be the person who's there to help them and to help them do their jobs more effectively, more efficiently, and more securely.
Yeah, I love the idea of security and compliance as an enabler. And I think that way and the process you described certainly is more cost effective in the long term as well versus trying to bolt on security after. You've got a unique kind of situation in the sense that you have IT and security and accountability for both. And so, I'd love to hear your perspective on what good looks like to have IT and security work together, because I know sometimes security is kind of the hero. They run into the burning building, save the baby, and IT's got a lot of the hard work, the patching, the asset inventory, the kind of thankless stuff. And I think sometimes companies don't realize how much of the CMMC requirements are actually on the IT side of the ledger. So I'd love to understand, how do you make sure they work together, and what's good look like there for you?
We've been super fortunate. So I have an awesome team. I think that's key to success for any leader in any organization, is having that team that you can rely on, you can trust, and you know that technically they are sound individuals. But the other thing that we've been super fortunate with is that we've had the opportunity to work with CyberSheath. Again, this is a plug, sorry. But it's really, we've really sort of separated that IT work from security by having your organization be able to provide a lot of the monitoring, the security, the hardening, and having IT partner with them to be able to not only learn, but support that team. So, I know I've said partner a ton in this conversation, but that's really how I look at it. Like if we're partnering, that means that we have each other's back. It means that we understand what we're both trying to achieve, and then we can work together as opposed to being opposing forces where, IT's complaining because security's, like in my past life, that was like, security's being crazy. They're telling me that I have to do this. IT's like, I don't want to do this. Like it's going to totally change the workflow. And security's saying you have to. Like those are things that, like, if you're partnering, everybody's at the same table. Everybody's approaching the problem for the same reason. And you might have different influences. You might have different reasons for doing what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you're still working in the same vein to be able to achieve what the organization needs as a whole. And that's what I've found has worked really well. In my past life, I had a security team and an IT team. Again, sometimes you have to play referee, but if you get them all on the same page, then they understand the importance of it. They understand what each group is trying to do, and then they can work more harmoniously together. And that is how I've really handled that in my career.
Obviously, you've had the experience of doing things internally, doing things with partners. Your company took the approach early on to partner with CyberSheath, which we're very grateful for, and preparing for CMMC success. What were some of the things that made you think, in relative to whether it's cybersecurity, IT, any component of kind of IT security and compliance, that made you think you needed help from an outside company? What were some of the considerations?
So many of the biggest consideration, I should say, it was the size of our team. When I started at EdgeCase, we had a very small infrastructure team. We had a very small IT team. And there was no way that we could do this on our own. I've gone down the compliance path in my past. And I had teams to do this, not just a few people to be able to do this. And the importance to us was really about being able to be compliant so that we could continue to gain and win contracts with the US government. So for me, it was really about finding an organization that could support us in a multifaceted manner. So whether it was with compliance itself, whether it was with security itself, or even IT, if we needed to supplement what we already had in-house, it was, I knew that we couldn't do it ourselves. It was just too big of an undertaking. And the cost to put teams together that would be big enough to be able to do what CyberSheath can do for us was just out of our scope completely from a budgetary perspective. So it was really about understanding what it took from past experience and then understanding the importance of the US government contracts that we were attempting to win and winning, and then the requirements that we had to meet in order to continue that revenue stream. So I knew we couldn't do this on our own. And so finding that right partner was super important and having that confidence in them.
Really interesting. I think you hit on a point that I think probably resonates with everybody here today is the fact that the cost piece and that obviously doing this externally can be far more cost effective or having a partner. The flip side of that, once you've kind of rationalized and made that decision and some of the things you shared earlier on kind of the RFP process, I can understand how you de-risk and picking your partners. But what were some of the risks once you made the decision that we're gonna find a partner to help us solve the CMMC problem? What were some of the risks that you thought about when picking a partner? And are there any specific factors you would advise our audience today to consider or maybe weight more heavily when selecting a partner to help them get to CMMC compliance?
Yeah, sure. So for me, one of the largest factors was, can I work with this team? Are they people that I trust? Are they people that I believe in? Are they people that I feel have the technical expertise that we need in order to achieve what we're trying to achieve in a timely fashion? And that, compliance is never a one and done kind of thing. It's an ongoing process. We're always having to reassess. We're always having to change with technology landscapes. We're always trying to do these things. And so to me, I'll use the word again, it's about partnerships and really being able to say, is this a team that I can work with? Is this a team that can support my team internally? And do they have the technology that I need to be able to meet the requirements that I have to meet? And from my perspective, one of the things that I always look for is like the openness of the organization to sort of open their doors. Like, here we are, this is what we do. And I have to say that CyberSheath has gone out of their way to say, here, meet Casey Lang before we sign the contract. Here, meet with Eric Noonan, the CEO, so we can have a conversation and understand the needs. And you really opened your doors. And that was one of the key things I was looking for. And that's what I've always looked for in partnerships is like, what is the availability of that team to my team, to me? And that plays a huge role in my decision-making, not only from a cost perspective, but from a day-to-day, can this work and can we make it happen? And
yeah, it's a great point, Kelly, because sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that I just heard in your answer is relative to whether it's CMMC or anything else is that you got to work with these people. They're going to be an extension of your team. And so you better make sure you can work with them because there's a lot at stake relative to your business revenue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes you'll get in with an organization where, like, on the outside, the marketing looks great. You don't really do your due diligence, and then you regret it later because either they're inaccessible, they have, like, in their mind what they think you need versus listening to what you have to say and understanding what your needs are. And that's really important. And a lot of that you can't do without investing time on your own. Like, you have to, ask for the meetings. You have to have the conversations. You have to sort of pull back those layers of the onion till you get to the point where you say, okay, I'm comfortable with this. And I think this could work. And that RFP process is super important and due diligence is super important. We talk about the subcontractors and how we vet the subcontractors and do they meet the requirements that we are flowing down to them, the same thing holds true for your partners, in whether it's hardware, software, services, whatever it is, that you still have to vet them in the same manner to know that, like, yes, this is going to be a good fit, or no, it's not going to be a good fit.
Yeah, what I love about that is so much of like CMMC, obviously cybersecurity requirements, and it's got its own acronyms and terminology and all that. But at the end of the day, it's a business decision, and a business decision when you're partnering with the service provider, whoever it is a relationship decision. And a relationship, you have to meet, there's no shortcut, is what I'm taking away. And you have to put in the time to make sure that you're investing in the right relationship. And I think that's important, because I think, everybody would love if there was a CMMC easy button, but there isn't. And picking the right partner is super important. And picking a partner means, picking a partner in any aspect of life means putting in the time, doing your due diligence. And if you do that, it should pay dividends. But don't take a shortcut. You've been super generous with your time, Kelly. So I'll make this the last question. I think this has been chock full of actionable information, which is always our goal. Our goal every time we kind of take anyone's time is to help them go further on their journey to compliance. And today, I think you've done that with a lot of your answers that are just so actionable. And so the final question that I'd love to get your perspective on is, your company leaned into CMMC early, took it very seriously from the start. But I often talk with companies who feel, if they stare at the CMMC requirement long enough, they can effectively talk themselves into not doing anything, partly because it's hard and it's expensive. And, it's almost like learning 3 different languages: the IT piece, the cybersecurity piece, the regulatory piece. And then I hear things like, I'm not sure if we even have CUI. I don't know if I have this clause in my contract. I don't think this is ever going to be enforced. I'm sure you kind of fielded some of those questions as you were kind of figuring out how to solve this for your company. How did you avoid inertia and put your company in a position to take such decisive action? What are the things that you can share that our audience can do to get moving?
Oh, yeah, sure. I think, to add to what you were saying, though, I think a company can stare at the requirements too and be like, oh, yeah, I'm compliant. Because they're like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I have this, I have that. And then when you look at it, you actually don't. And that, to me, I think it comes with experience. It comes with the realization that these requirements are different than the past requirements. I feel like, I'll go back to one of my initial answers, is that, it feels like CMMC has a little bit more teeth to it than NIST 800-171 did. It was one of those things like, oh, do we have to get audited? Do we have to get certified? What's that going to look like with NIST 800-171? With CMMC, there's more of a plan, and they have a process that they want you to follow. And I think that, from my perspective, because I'm responsible for operations, I'm always looking at, how do we continue the business? What does this mean? And to us, it means that we need to be able to do U.S. government contracting. And if we don't meet the requirements, we're not going to get contracts. And so it got pretty easy to be able to say, yeah, this is really important to us. So that's sort of my motivating factor, is that, like, look at that business case. What does your business case look like? What do you need to be able to do? And what do you need to be able to continue in order to survive? And for us, it was really doing U.S. government contracting. And in order to do that, I know from my past life, there are requirements, and CMMC is no different. Like, you have to be able to prove, and now they're asking you to prove that you can be compliant with the requirements, that you have evidence that you're compliant with the requirements. So leaning into it was an easy decision for me. Once I read it and saw it, it was like, this is a little different. Like, we need to be on the ball. They're asking us for scores. They're asking us to have scores in a system that the government controls. They're asking us to prove that we have the evidence to show that we can do the things we say we can do. And for me, CUI, safeguarding CUI, is my major concern for our organization always. Like, that to me is the heart of my job when it comes to compliance and government contracting. And so it might be a little bit nature because you can talk yourself out of it. You can say, I don't really need this. You can say, oh, I'm compliant. Don't worry about it. But until you know, you don't know. And for me, I need to know because the organization depends on it. So that's sort of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of the thinking around like why leaning in was so important to me.
No, I think it does answer the question. I also think it gives the audience a bit of a roadmap. This whole session has been, I think, a bit of a roadmap too around how do I take these kind of sometimes arcane requirements, put them into terms the business can understand, get funding, and go do something. And what I loved about our time today is that so practical around like here's how I put it into business terms, here's how I explained it in a way the business would care and then fund, and here's how I dealt with the reality of like we weren't going to get everything all at once, and also not fooling ourselves around like again, I think I'm compliant. I think we can do that. And I love that statement. It's like we can do that. But the requirement is, are you doing it? And do you have evidence? And so I loved how you kind of summed that up. And I think this will be such an important session for everybody in the audience who has maybe not leaned into the requirement yet, has been waiting. The idea that this time it's real, this time it has teeth, this time they're asking for scores, they're asking for evidence. All the things you said are, I think, actionable things people can take away, bring back to their executive teams in a way to move the ball forward, which is always what we're trying to do with these sessions. So Kelly, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I think this session has been fantastic, and I think will move our audience forward in their journey to compliance. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly, for that informative question and answer session, providing key insights for DIB companies as they plan to ready themselves for CMMC 2.0.